Hi, my name is Kristen and I'm the creator of the SOS payroll tracking tool. This tool is designed to help departments monitor and predict salary payments and, most importantly, to catch payroll errors before they occur and impact your budget. When you first open the SOS payroll tracking sheet, you'll find a link to training videos and a color key that will help you keep track of salary projections. The next sheet over is the payroll calendar, pretty straightforward and very handy to keep as a reference. And last is the forecasting tool. We'll come back to that in a bit, but for now let's look at our color coding. Green, obviously, is good. It means that you're on the right track for correct payment. Yellow means that there's a small overpayment projected, but it's within a pretty normal and acceptable range for most cases. Orange means that an overpayment could be more significant. In the version that you receive, any amount that's $2 or more in overpayment will be highlighted in orange. And finally, blue means that an underpayment is projected, meaning that your employees might not receive appropriate compensation. Anytime that there's an underpayment, no matter how small, the amount will be highlighted in blue. This is because we want to ensure that employees should never be shorted their full pay. And finally, I have some recommended color coding. These would be manual changes that you will make as information comes in. I use different shades of purple to differentiate between amounts that I've projected versus amounts that I have actually verified with EDR information. Before we go any farther, it's important to note that color coding represented in this table is not a representation of university policy or actual safety for your accounts. The $2 amount for the orange flag is really just a number I picked based on my own budgeting preferences. The thing that you want to pay the most attention to is whether you have enough money in your accounts to cover what the forecast is telling you. For example, if you have an employee who's going to be paid an extra couple of dollars, the time and therefore cost spent fixing that error could exceed the actual worth that you're intending to fix. However, if you don't have an extra couple of dollars in that account, then it's time to fix it. Deficits will always require a correction, so at that point it will be faster and much less costly to prevent an overpayment. So to recap, just because it's in orange doesn't mean that you're going to go into deficit, and just because it's in yellow doesn't mean that you're necessarily safe. Okay, now that we know the basics of the SOS tool, let's dig in. Let's say that you have 6 employees who are all being paid the same amount over the same time periods. And one more employee for good measure. Let's give them only one working date. We would begin by making a projection of what their pay would look like based on their start and end dates. First, I'm going to change my color coding guide to help me. Light purple for active contract dates. Now let's do the money part. If you've seen my video on understanding salaries, you'll know that simple contracts typically pay out at a steady rate, with the only potential exceptions being the start and end dates of the contract periods. Our forecast may look something like this, or like this. And voila! Our payroll forecast is complete and we're done forever. Just kidding. We've only gotten started. This is what employee salary might look like, not necessarily what it will look like. You should receive regular EDRs or expense distribution reports for your employees. If you aren't getting them, or if you need to add a new FDCC, please contact Expense Distribution Report at boisestate.edu to adjust that. EDRs typically look like this. There's a lot of information happening here, but the trick is to sort by account code. You'll see that salaries are occurring under accounts beginning with 4-1, and fringe activity, things like workers' comp, unemployment, social security, are coded with accounts beginning 4-2. If you're lucky enough to have only a few FDCCs to monitor, you can sort ascending to see only the salary activity that you'll be tracking. Those who are tracking accounts shared with others may need to comb through the data a little more carefully. Okay, let's take this information from the EDR and put it into our spreadsheet. Thankfully, my employees show up in the same order that I have them listed in, so this time all I need to do is copy and paste into the appropriate section. I'm also going to update my coloring so that I know that this information is confirmed with the EDR. And then I need to go through and update information that doesn't correspond with the projection that I made. We can see that some employees are still on track for correct payment. Bella and Brooklyn Bronco are both perfectly on track to receive correct payment. Others, it looks like they're going to be overpaid. Let's see what happens when we take what we saw for the first period and move it out into the other periods. As we know, payment typically occurs in a pattern. So here's what it looks like when we update based on what we've seen so far. There we are. It looks like Bobby Bronco is on track to receive close enough to a correct payment as long as I have enough funds in that account. However, it looks like others are definitely headed for an overpayment. You can contact HR now, or wait until the next EDR period. Sometimes there are anomalies that occur at the beginning of a pay period that may even out by the end of the employee's contract. Waiting until you have more information to see if there's a pattern or anomaly that has occurred can help you decide if you need to contact HR right away or if it may be more beneficial to wait and see if it'll even out. Let's see what happens if we include information from the next pay period. It looks like Buddy Bronco was paid less than the first one. Perhaps there was an anomaly. What happens if they are paid $108.75 for the remaining pay periods? If that happens, it looks like their payment's going to occur correctly. The others, however, are still going to be overpaid, so it's definitely time to contact HR. Even if it looks like things are going to work out, or you contact HR to let them know that there's an issue, it's definitely important to keep monitoring to make sure that final pay is still correct. Our next step at this point would be to note any action that we took and what date it occurred on. And then continue tracking with the next EDR. Now we'd continue our projection based on the adjustments made by HR. According to our most recent projections, it looks like everything is going to pay out okay, but again, still important to continue to monitor. One thing you'll notice is that we haven't looked at anything for Bjorn Bronco. That's because their pay won't appear until later in the semester, only over one pay period. Until that occurs, they won't show up on any of the other EDRs. As we wrap up this tutorial for the SOS Save Our Salaries tool, I wanted to highlight one additional feature, and that's the funding source. Both on EDRs and salary ledgers, you can tell where an employee is being paid from. This is especially important to monitor and check too. Like payment patterns, once it's established as occurring from a single FDCC, it typically won't switch over. However, it's still important to keep an eye on it and make sure that your employees are being paid not only the correct amount, but from the correct sources. This is especially true if you have any adjustments to LOAs that you may be made after the deadline. Check for those funding sources in the EDR to make sure that any changes have gone through correctly. This wraps up our tutorial of the Save Our Salaries SOS tool. I hope you find it useful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Kristen Batten at boisestate.edu. Thanks so much.